Do you have difficulty enjoying the moments that matter in life because you are always thinking about the tasks that are happening or what's coming next? Are you missing the big moments because you're in your own head, worried about, fixated on something to do with efficiency, planning, productivity? You're missing moments in life. Welcome back to the Live Deep podcast, where we dive deep on all things physical and emotional fitness and help you break free from unhealthy habits to find and live your best life yet. If you're new to the show, welcome. We're so glad to have you. My name is Jesse Carrajat. I am your host and guide on this journey. I am a U.S. Marine veteran, former successful healthcare executive turned health coach, fitness trainer, and the proud founder of Altum Fitness. Again, so glad you're here. If you're joining us for the first time or maybe continuing along, this is part 2 of a 6-part series called Let It Go, a guide to living present in 2024. In our last episode, we really laid the foundation of the series. If you haven't heard it, I encourage you to go back to part 1. And really what this series is about is we want to help you identify, if you have an issue with control, and we're going to go into what control is from a scientific, psychological standpoint today. And if you do, or if you know someone who does, how to break free from the chains of control to find freedom. And the key word here is to live present, so you can enjoy your life and find joy in your life, which is what you deserve. So last week, we touched on what is called the control release cycle. That is when you live a life so focused on controlling your environment, yourself, and others, mitigating uncertainty, finding safety. When you structure a life around those things, you burn out and you jump over to an other side, which is release, escaping, disassociating from life. We introduced that concept last week, so if you're not familiar with it, I encourage you to go back to part 1. And today, what we're going to do is in part 2, called Obsessed with Control, we're going to help you recognize the signs that you may have an issue with control. And if you don't, this could be helpful if you're in a relationship with someone who does have an issue with control, or maybe you know someone who does. So today what we're going to do is we're going to ask really important questions around control. What is it? Why do some people have issues with control and others don't? What's happening in our brains? What are some contributing factors that maybe influence someone to have control issues? And then we'll kind of foreshadow next week's episode, which is what are some things that we can do about it and what are some small steps that we can take to break free from those chains of control. So let's get started. We're going to dive right in and try to answer the question, what is control? What is the definition of control? Well, by Psychology Today, and you can Google if you want your own definitions, their definition is exerting influence over one's environment or the actions or behaviors of another person. Exerting influence. And we're going to dive into the different types of control in a second. But Psych Central describes control as, quote, a means to manage uncertainties and reduce the anxiety associated with the unknown. Some huge, important phrases there. Manage uncertainties and or reduce anxiety. So some foreshadowing here as we get into the episode. Typically, people with highest needs for control also have higher general anxiety. Why is that? And we're going to talk about that. And why is it important? And this goes back to part 1, but why is it important to understand control and understand if we have an issue with it? Because what we know is an incessant need or even obsessive need for control can wreak havoc in our lives, whether it's relationships, careers, joy, etc. So it's pivotal. It can quite literally sap and suck all the joy out of someone's life if they're just desperately trying to control every single detail of their life. And we're going to get into that. Do you disagree? Ever seen a marriage or just any romantic relationship, committed relationship fall apart because one of the people in that relationship micromanages, manipulates, desperately tries to control every aspect of the other, maybe both people in a relationship? Ever seen a career fall apart or someone's job reputation fall apart because of all of the tension and conflict in their life because they're trying to control work relationships. I can relate with that. So we're going to dive into it. There's no doubt that it's important. And let's start with this. We've already defined control. How about the types of control? And again, all this is rooted in science. I'm trying to stick with some definitions and some categories that are real and are tried and true. Search around yourself and you'll find different models, but there are primarily 3 different ways that people control, or I might even say types of control exerted. And the first one is controlling others or other people. Things like micromanaging our children, micromanaging our spouse or colleagues, gaslighting or manipulating for a certain end or for a certain goal or outcome. Science shows that typically people who are overly critical or verbally abusive are controllers. They're dissatisfied, frustrated, upset with someone else's behavior, and they feel the need to correct or outspokenly just talk down on someone else to control their behaviors. Maybe helicopter parenting, helicopter spousing, husbanding, wifing, making up words here. But those are all efforts to control other people's and their actions based on some truth that we hold and some truth that we find to be real and worth conflict over. The other major area where people seek to control is ourselves. You'll see things like compulsive scheduling, compulsive morning routines, exercising, dieting, eating. And key here is people who struggle with control, and again, controlling outcomes, uncertainties, things like that, they'll set goals for themselves. And when those goals kind of fall apart or when those plans fall apart, they get very anxious, upset, irritable, and you can just tell. Especially around exercising, right? Look, let's just say you have a weekly routine like me. You're going to do resistance training X amount of times. You're going to do cardio this many times. Life happens. You don't get to do it. And then you just fall apart. You become irritable, upset, maybe even put aside more important priorities so that you can hit those goals so you have a semblance of control. It could even be substance abuse as a means of control. When people feel out of control, they turn to something that they can't control, even like alcohol. They can control their internal state. They can ingest it, change the way that they feel, cope with feeling out of control. But we try to control ourselves. And there are a lot of people, and you can probably identify people in your life, or maybe you are someone who is that way. Dealing with a chaotic external environment by controlling yourself, your thoughts, your life, your schedule, your routines. And then the last of the 3 is controlling our external environment. So these are things like physically, literally, compulsive tidying, organizing, cleaning. Our environment could be our work environment, trying desperately to control others, create systems and processes that guarantee our success in our career, try our best, and it's fleeting and stressful, but to control our reputation within our career or within our company. And I can go on and on, but the 3 main ways that we control are, again, other people, ourselves, and our environment. And a huge question, and I'm going to linger here, that we should be asking is why is it that some people find themselves fixated on and struggling more with control than others? Why are there some people that think about who they might be, that you just think to yourself, man, they just flow through life? It seems like nothing phases them. They don't get worked up over the small things. They don't sweat the small stuff. Details don't stress them out. Why do they seem like they go through life so effortlessly? And maybe those same people sometimes struggle with things like being late, being organized, etc. But they probably certainly don't find themselves as stressed and anxious. Why are some people that way? While other people hold on desperately, get irritable, anxious, type A type people trying to control everything. Why is that? Let's dive into that. The desire for control often stems from an underlying fear of, back to this word, uncertainty, and probably have, and the science is behind this, a history of unpredictability in their own life. A number one cause of why someone is a controller or interested in or obsessed with control is trauma. Trauma is a word that we didn't intend on it on this show, but that word keeps coming up, whether it's esteemed guests like Benoit Kim, psychotherapist, or just anybody. Trauma keeps coming up. One definition of trauma, and I encourage you to look it up, but this is from Benoit Kim, is an abrupt breaking of a pattern that previously implied safety. Think about trauma. Trauma could be what they call big T or capital T, a violent trauma that happens to you. It could be something severe, objectively, sexual trauma, sexual abuse, physical abuse, crimes, things like that. And the pattern is you're in a relationship doing life and something happens to abruptly change it. That's trauma. Trauma creates instability, especially if someone has trauma during formative years, early years. What happens later on in their life is they desperately want predictability and they want stability. So they do everything they can in their life to mitigate unexpected pain, unexpected discomfort. I'll share a quick but really important story from my life. When I was a sophomore in high school, my father was supposed to just bring me back to my mom's house, my mom and my stepdad, and instead detoured to the beach. I grew up on the Jersey Shore, and unexpectedly told me that, and I had no idea this was coming, that he had AIDS, and that he had had AIDS for quite some time. And he had gotten AIDS through intravenous drug use. You can imagine that shattered what was previously predictable, what I previously understood about people and things, because it was coming from my father, and at that time, the closest, most intimate relationship in my life. What I learned was people can keep secrets. People can have these massive secrets that you don't know about. There's a trust factor there. Later on in life, as his sickness started to actually take over his physical health, but my father, that same father, actually a couple of years later, while I was still in high school, was taking me home from his house, and he actually shared with me, he pulled over by a park, and he said to me, "You see that gazebo over there at that park? I am going to kill myself over there." And I'm not sharing this for some shock factor. I'm sharing this to build to a broader point, but this is a young man myself, and my father was putting a weight on me that I didn't deserve to carry, and was breaking and shattering my understanding of humanity and relationships and people, and instilling fear. He told me that he was planning on killing himself and he was going to do it. And then he dropped me off and I went back to school. And a 17-year-old boy walking through the hallways, trying to navigate life, knowing that, somewhere out there that there's this real potential for that to happen. So why do I say this? That's trauma. And I'm only recently learning to put that word to it. But think about what that taught me about life and about relationships and about people. I can see now that if that was sprung on me and that was dropped on me and the heavy emotional load that put on me, I can see how now, 20 plus years later, I build and craft a life to try to prevent things from like that happening. And then I also expect things like that to happen, and how that expectation changes how I do life. And it's no wonder that I build foundations to prevent pain and hurt, right? So that's trauma. Big, long explanation of trauma. Sorry, it's emotional for me to dive in there. But the next reason why people might struggle with control is just a pure psychological disorder, right? Things like anxiety disorder, panic disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder. All of those conditions amplify a need for safety. And to do that, it's about mitigating uncertainties. So oftentimes, if you are struggling with a disorder like that, I'll call it a comorbidity, could be a desire to control, because all of this is rooted in controlling fear and circumstances. Another factor for people that desire control or obsess about it is low or damaged self-esteem. Back to myself. That same father was, and again, in hindsight, I speak this way, but was hyper-focused on and hypercritical on every attribute of myself and my brother's life. How you act, what you're accomplishing, what you're wearing, what your attitude is, just hyper micromanager. When you grow up that way and you're become obsessively fixated on all of those attributes of yourself and not feeling self-assured and confident in yourself, those characteristics carry over, and those are things that you seek to control internally and externally for the rest of your life. Low self-esteem, 100% can attribute towards someone desiring control. And then just a couple more I'll touch on. Fear of failure. Think about it. If you're obsessed with things like punctuality, productivity, efficiency, for what? To what end? It's to accomplish something. And oftentimes that thing that you're accomplishing is somewhat rooted in success, or the opposite, a fear of failure. And just a couple other things: lack of trust, fear of abandonment, and just a fear or an avoidance of painful emotions, disappointing people, letting people down, failing, those things. All of these, and if you can kind of feel it, to put a word to it, negative emotions, which are underlying causes for people to try to control their environment, their self, or others. How common is this problem? A study from American Psychological Association reveals that 60% of adults in the US admit that their lives are governed more by fears than desires, avoiding something versus pursuing something. Is that you? It's certainly me. And if you're asking yourself the question, do I have control issues? Odds literally are, I just stated those odds, that you do. And we're going to help answer some of those questions. But first, a quick PSA, public service announcement. If you don't know, now you know. We will be launching the Altum Fitness app on St. Paddy's Day 2024. That is 3/17/2024. Guys, I couldn't be more excited for this. It has been a long time coming. It's a world-class fitness app with training programs designed by expert coaches. Every single program is 8, 12, 16 weeks. You can shop through all of them, different goals for different experience levels, amazing videos and demonstrations, everything that you could possibly need to build a fit life. But what makes us unique, what makes this different, is that it's really about habit change. So we're going to have multiple habit change programs and habit implementation programs. The first one we're rolling out, an alcohol reset. If you want to cut back or cut out alcohol for 30 days, we've got a program for you. A digital detox for 14 days. We've got caffeine cleanse. We've even got mindfulness implementation courses. All of that included in one monthly subscription. It's a low subscription for $19.99. That'll give you access to our tribe companion community. That's where all of our coaches will be. We'll be answering questions, doing all sorts of really cool exclusive events, launching content, etc., etc. So if you want to be on our VIP list, visit altumfitness.com now. Join. We're already sending out great content to help you with things like habit change and fitness. And we're going to pre-launch our app to that list. So again, that's altumfitness.com. You can join our VIP list. So be on the lookout. Altum Fitness app is coming your way 3/17/2024. So let's get to the crux. Is that a word? Crux, point of whatever this episode, which is, how can you recognize if control has its grips on you? Maybe you're asking yourself, hey, is control insidious in my life? Is it hurting my relationships, my career, or just my ability to be present? And we're going to talk about 4 signs that you do have an issue with control. The first one, over planning. Every aspect of your day, week, month, calendars, Post-it notes, multiple different apps, not all of which you actually use, but just in a little bit of an obsession on over planning things that don't even need to be planned. Maybe you've gotten that feedback, or maybe you just know it. Again, controlling the uncontrollable. How about this one? Guilty. Feeling restless or anxious when things don't go according to plan. Every night in the Carrajat household, got this image in my head, dinner time, image in my head, family taking turns, having conversations, sharing the highlight of their day, a prayer before a meal. Nobody's fighting. Everyone's in harmony. What happens? Got kids running across the room. A fight breaks out. They're eating with their hands. Got a baby choking. I mean, who knows, right? But it just turns to chaos pretty quick. How do you handle that? How do you feel internally? What does your internal emotional thermometer do in those moments? I'll tell you what mine has done historically. Off the charts. Disappointed, frustrated. Turns into me correcting. It doesn't turn into a loving dinner. It turns into a punitive, right? Trying my best. And where is that line? This is a whole other episode, but where is that line between like, hey, this is an opportunity to correct and discipline versus an opportunity to just let life happen, right? Let it go. Just let it go. But how do you feel when things don't go as planned? How about like if you've got a big family, you're trying to get out the door, you've got little kids that don't want to put their shoes on, or maybe it's just at work. You have a presentation, you go in, you think it's going to go a certain way, you're going to go into executing whatever ideas that you have, and then someone throws up a couple of red flags or roadblocks. Next thing you know it, unexpectedly, things aren't going your way. How do you feel? Do you take that personally? Do you feel criticized? Or do you just accept it? I can give you a million examples, but do you feel anxious, frustrated, impatient, or restless when things don't go according to plan? We all do, but how bad is it for you? You should be asking yourself that question. This is a huge one, and again, almost the whole point of this series. Do you have difficulty enjoying the moments that matter in life because you are always thinking about the tasks that are happening or what's coming next? Are you missing the big moments because you're in your own head, worried about, fixated on something to do with efficiency, planning, productivity? You're missing moments in life. Last one, fourth one. Are you a perfectionist with your fitness, at work, in your relationship? And is that pursuit for perfection impacting your life, your relationships, your joy? Are you not accepting anything other than perfect at the expense of being present? Are you not accepting anything other than perfect at the expense of being present in life? Unsure? Take that list. Again, over planning, restless or anxious when things don't go your way, missing the moments that matter, perfectionist. Those four. Take those four to someone you love, someone that loves you, maybe a friend, maybe your parents, maybe a colleague, and ask them, hey, where do you see me? Give me an honest assessment of me. See what they say. So those are the four ways, or the four questions you should be asking yourself. Next week, we are going to dive into the strategy of letting go of control. We'll explore some practical ways to loosen that grip on control, things like mindfulness, breath work, time management techniques, and even therapy. Highly recommend. Most people can probably benefit from therapy, myself included, and I have. So that'll be all on the next episode, which will be released in this same week. We're moving towards 2 episodes per week for this series. Before we sign off, first, please, you hear this anywhere you listen or anywhere you go these days, but if you haven't followed, liked, or even commented, reviewed our show, please do so. Everyone tells me the algorithm supports that, and we need that to reach more people, which is the goal. So please like, follow, share, all the things, if you could, be greatly appreciated. We hope you stick with us for next week. And then in the weeks that follow, we're going to go into the release side of things. What are the unhealthy ways to kind of disconnect and disengage? And what are some healthy ways? And then we're going to wrap up with an expert on the topic. So before we go and before we close, I'm going to leave you with an amazing quote and a thought to really stew on and think through and apply in your life from Sonia Riccati. Quote, "Accept what is. Let go of what was, and have faith in what will be." This is my wish and my hope for everybody listening. May these words bless you this week as we all take one step closer to letting go and living deep. See you next time.